This is not choice. This is your nervous system working perfectly well to keep you safe and alive. And it happens involuntarily in your nervous system through the vagus nerve. It's a trauma response. And when you're perceiving that you're in danger, because you're constantly in fight, flight, because your brain is physiologically changed shape. And so your amygdala, that fear center, is constantly scanning for cues of danger. It's exhausting. And eventually the nervous system needs a break and it just shuts you down for a while because that's the next best thing. And when you're there in that dorsal vagal, actually you're releasing opioids in your body, which means that if you do get attacked, it's got a numbing effect. And that's what happens to humans. We go numb, we dissociate, we don't feel, and we get disconnected.
Hi, everyone. This is Riley, one of the producers of Prey vs. Predator, and I wanted to hop back on to remind you to consider supporting us on Patreon. You can choose between a one-time gift or regular donations for as little as $3 a month. All donations go towards production costs so we can continue this project for years to come. We love our community and wanted to say a big thank you to all our listeners and supporters. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to Prey vs. Predator. We are so happy for you to join us today. We have a second episode with our amazing guest, Carla Shohet. Welcome back. Carla Shohet is a trauma and narcissistic abuse recovery psychologist. Like I said, this is our second episode. So if you're just tuning in, you may want to check us out in our previous episode with her. She has so many insights. Carla, can you give us some quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again. So lovely to be here. I am a trauma and narcissistic abuse recovery psychologist, as you rightly said. I'm also a somatic therapist, a Brainspotting practitioner, and a positive psychology coach. And what all that means is that I am a psychologist that specializes on root cause resolution, not just symptoms management.
So interesting. Okay, so you have mentioned thus far the word Brainspotting. I don't know what that means. I only know the movie Trainspotting. So that's what I always think of whenever you say Brainspotting. So what is Brainspotting? I'm so intrigued.
So Brainspotting is it's a lot of people. It sparks curiosity in a lot of people. And Brainspotting is a subcortical healing modality to heal from trauma in a very, very gentle but very deep way. It uses the optical nerve. So our eyes are actually part of our brain, even though they're outside, and they are connected from the back of our eyeballs right through the three parts of the brain that we're concerned with when we talk about trauma recovery. It connects from the back of the eye through the prefrontal cortex, which is that logical, verbal, or reasoning part of the brain, where we are present, connected ourselves in adult self-leadership. And then it goes right through to the limbic system, which is the emotional and memory part of our brain, and right down into the brainstem, which then connects into the body. So we use Brainspotting and eye positioning as a portal to get deep into the subcortical parts of the brain, because trauma is actually stored in the body. So we have to go via the deeper parts of the brain to be able to access the trauma capsules, to be able to then process the traumas and release them from our body. So it's a little bit of an weird modality, let's say, because it doesn't have to use language at all. It can bypass the verbal aspect of therapy. Some sessions that I do with clients, they say absolutely nothing at all. I say absolutely nothing at all, and it still works. It's a little bit, you can think of it a bit like when you cut your skin and you get a wound right in your skin, and then you just clean the wound, and at most you put a Band-Aid on it. But you do nothing else, and the skin grows by itself. It knows what to do. It's kind of similar with Brainspotting. The body wants to heal. It knows what to do. And what Brainspotting does through the eye positioning and going through the optical nerve, it just allows the body to start to process trauma from wherever it needs to start processing trauma. The whole principle of Brainspotting is based on the principle of uncertainty, which is not what we like as humans. We like to know, how is it working? Am I doing it right? So the first times you try Brainspotting, it can feel a little bit uncomfortable. And, when we have trauma, usually we have a disconnection with our body, so we don't feel. We get numb and dissociated from our sensations in our body. And what Brainspotting tends to do is it kind of improves the communication between subcortical brain and prefrontal cortex again, because there is a layer that builds because of trauma between the two hemispheres of the brain that kind of make it difficult then for the sensation, the highway communication through the vagus nerve that's always coming up from the body to the brain. So 80% of communication is coming from our gut to our brain, and only 20% from the brain to the gut. So if I asked you, for example, let's do this test. If I said to you, well, maybe it might not work with you guys because you know more than the layman out there. But if I said to you, what comes first, thoughts or feelings, what would you say?
Depends.
Feelings for me.
Yeah, it didn't work. This test did not work in this podcast. But most people, when I ask that question, what we're taught in society is the opposite. And 85% of people will always say, yeah, your thoughts determine how you feel. And then that's what then creates your actions, right? Wrong. Absolutely. And you know the answer to this because you're in this space.
Right.
But a lot of people don't understand that. And, sensations in the body always start first. It's called neuroception. It's what we feel first. It's what you see in those wildlife documentaries when you see an antelope eating the grass, or even in your house, if you have a pet, right? They're just doing their own thing quite happily, just eating or whatever, in what I would call ventral vagal, feeling safe, just eating. And then suddenly you see them and they suddenly stand up and their ears perk up. Well, what are they doing? Well, for us humans, is that feeling of you walk into a room and you suddenly get a sensation of, oh, there's an atmosphere. Well, how do you know that? It's neuroception. It's that gut feeling. It's not woo-woo, it's science. We have these neurotransmitters that travel through the vagus nerve up to our brain to communicate something about our environment. But often with trauma, because the vagus nerve gets damaged and we get, protector parts that confuse our ideas and we get disconnected from our body in order to keep us, our brain does that to keep us safe. We don't know what's going on inside of us.
Man, I want to park there because that just it really hits a little moment for me. I'm just relating to what you're saying in terms of, I remember I often would when I am in a relationship with somebody who's predatory, and there's been a few for me in my life. What will happen is I sometimes can come in a room and I will have this sensation of danger. And my head will always dismiss it, or would in the past have dismissed it. And, like, don't be silly, you can't feel that. But I would have this internal knowing that I was in danger, and yet an intellectual dismissing of it. So you just put a really powerful language to it. So thank you for that. But I want to kind of go back a little bit, because when we were talking in our first episode with you, one of the things that I think that we appreciate about you is you have done so much of your own work around this, and you have pieced so many different modalities together. You had used the image with us of one of those 4D back in the 90s, those 4D pictures that you stare at, and then all of a sudden you said you can see the picture and you can't unsee it once you've seen it. And what I think you bring to the table that very few others do is you've done so much of this work and you really do see this picture, and you have all these modalities that you bring to open up that language for it. And you really, that last time we talked with you, you left us with more questions, burning questions, I think we said, than we had time to answer for. I wonder if you would sort of be willing to answer some of our burning questions here in this episode.
100%. Far away.
Jill, you had one.
Well, I don't want to hog Carla.
Please call.
Okay, so
away.
Go for it.
Okay, so I'm going to say that not all of our listeners know what the vagus nerve is. Not all of our listeners know what polyvagal theory is. Just pretend like we have no idea and tell us about it.
So the vagus nerve is a nerve that we all have inside our body. It was unbeknown to me as well, even as a psychologist of 22 years. And it's you can think of it as a highway communication system in our body of neurotransmitters. A highway, literally, with messages going up and down from the brain to the body. It travels, it starts at the base of our neck in the brainstem. It wraps around our social engagement system. And if you could see me is it's kind of wrapping around the social engagement part of our body, which is our face and our chest, where we're able to smile, to communicate with our face. Okay, so it wraps around that. It wraps around all our organs, and it communicates, and it operates with involuntary functions in the body and in the brain. So it's operating all those things that are happening involuntarily in your body, your breathing, your heart beating, your digestive system, your immune function, all those things. It's involved in all of it. And what happens is that when we experience trauma, which is, an overwhelming level of stress in our nervous system, those stress hormones get stuck and it causes damage to these highways. Like there are now roadworks in the way. And the information, which is, I think I've already said, 80% comes from gut to brain, travels from the gut to the brain. I don't know why they call it the second brain. It should be the first brain because most of the communication starts in the gut. It's called neuroception. It's that felt sense that we get disconnected from because we think it's woo-woo. It's not woo-woo, it's science. And it travels, or it tries to travel up to the brain, to the prefrontal cortex, so we can make sense of it. The prefrontal cortex is the two parts of the brain. Okay, the prefrontal cortex is about what is it? It's analytical. It wants to know if I'm got a glass of water, it will say that's H2O. But the feeling brain, the subcortical parts of the brain, the emotional parts of the brain, and the vagus nerve that goes with it from the neck down are all about the feeling. It's cold, it's flowing, it's got fish in it if it's a river, it's refreshing. Okay. And it's this communication. Both parts have to communicate to each other to be able to be in sync for us to understand what's going on in our brain and our body. But there is damage. There are roadworks in the way because one, trauma gets stuck and it causes these roadblocks. And two, the social engagement part of our nervous system, of that vagus nerve, we're not actually born with it because it's for our happiness, for our groundedness, for our calm, for our social engagement. And the brain doesn't care about that. The brain is there for our survival. So we have two parts of the vagus nerve that are with us when we're born. The sympathetic part, the fight-flight response. Okay, when we feel that there is danger, we can respond. The vagus nerve releases all the hormones and floods the body with cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine to make us mobilize, run away from the danger or fight the danger. And then there is another part of the vagus nerve that does the opposite. It down-regulates all our system. It slows down the heart rate, blood pressure goes down, the breath becomes, very, very shallow because it wants to mobilize its protection through immobilization. So you shrink and actually I want to share something at this point with you because you might find it really, really cool. I did. I mentioned this in one of our messages before coming onto this episodes. And your title to this podcast is very, very, very clever. Not just because we're talking about, the predator being maybe a narcissistic, psychopathic, sociopathic, toxic person and the prey being the victim or the survivor, which is the term I prefer to use, but because this system of survival that we're born with, this sympathetic or fight flight, or what we know as in polyvagal theory as dorsal vagal, that shutdown freeze response. So it's protection through mobilization or protection through immobilization. You can see this in animals. When you see there is a prey, an antelope eating grass, doing its own thing, and suddenly the neuroception in its body, that felt sense, tells it there is danger in the environment. It senses maybe through the sense of smell or the hearing, or it tells it there is a predator. Okay. So the predator, the cheetah, let's say, I don't know if that's scientifically correct, but let's say that a cheetah is a predator for an antelope. It sees the cheetah and its sympathetic nervous system gets activated in less than a split second and it starts running away. The cheetah is faster, it gets closer. It's now the antelope is now perceiving life-threatening danger. And it goes into shutdown. Literally, you see them drop down. If you've seen those wildlife programs, you see that, run. The system, the nervous system gets exhausted. It now perceives that you're in life-threatening danger. The next best thing it can do is to activate the dorsal vagal shutdown through the vagus nerve. And the antelope plays dead. And you're like, what are you doing? This is, in humans, this is like depression, suicidality, feeling really down, numb. I can't get up. This is not choice. This is your nervous system working perfectly well to keep you safe and alive. and it happens involuntarily in your nervous system through the vagus nerve. It's a trauma response. And when you're perceiving that you're in danger, because you're constantly in fight, flight, because your brain has physiologically changed shape. And so your amygdala, that fear center, is constantly scanning for cues of danger. It's exhausting. And eventually the nervous system needs a break, and it just shuts you down for a while, because that's the next best thing. And when you're there in that dorsal vagal, actually you're releasing opioids in your body, which means that if you do get attacked, it's got a numbing effect. And that's what happens to humans. We go numb, we dissociate, we don't feel, and we get disconnected from our vagus nerve, the sensations in our body. We don't know. If I said to you, how do you feel? And you said happy. And I said, well, how do you know you feel happy? I have happy thoughts. But actually the sensations are the important part here, and even numbness is not nothing. It's a feeling. Mm-hmm. Not feeling is feeling. And there's a lot of confusion around this. And it's all, the reason I'm saying this is because this nervous system kind of hierarchy that we all have, that we're born with, is completely related to the polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve. And I just think that your prey versus predator title just fits in really, really well, because it really describes, as preys, as victim survivors, how we feel in absolute, constant danger. And then we have these responsive, either we reactively abuse when we keep prodding by the predator, the narcissistic abusive person in our life, or eventually we're just going to shut down. And that can look like, you being very robotic. You're kind of there, but you're not really in your body. You're appeasing, you're pleasing, you're fawning your abuser, because that kind of diminishes and lowers the threat for you.
Well, and my brain is exploding because I feel like that was the most perfect segue into my burning question, which was, as you're talking about this, one of the things that we've talked about here is this idea of perfect prey, and perfect prey. That prey, as humans, we don't look for a predator. We don't run out to try to find somebody to hurt us and belittle us and demean us and devalue us, but rather that the predator looks for us. Because one of the things that I wonder for prey, one of the commonalities of prey, and I'm curious as to what you think about this. One of the commonalities that I see is prey. As humans, we tend to go into, when we're traumatized, like a please and appease. We tend not to maybe freeze or fight, or but to please and appease. And so when a predator sees that we are somebody who, when we're traumatized, will not voluntarily but involuntarily, as you so beautifully put it, our trauma mode is please and appease. And so we get hurt by the predator. We please and appease. It all looks nice on the surface because we look very docile. We look very nice. We look very easy to manipulate and control. And our body doesn't feel healthy, but our brains are frozen. Like we have no choice but to please and appease, because that's our trauma mode. And I'm wondering, what do you think of that? Is that possible, that part of what makes us as victims of predatory behavior, part of that is we often have this please and appease mechanism that we have very little control over if we don't have a language for it, or don't have some of the methods that you're saying to help us put words to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Hit the nail on the head. It's called fawning. It's people pleasing to reduce the threat from the abuser. If I'm nice to you, maybe you won't be horrible to me. It's a survival mode again. And it's one of the 4 trauma responses that's probably least spoken about, is people pleasing. People pleasing is also a protector part. They are a coping mechanism of the nervous system. You don't have control over it. It's your version of normal, what you learned before you ever met your abuser.
Right.
You had a version of, this is who I need to be to keep safe, from probably early developmental stages.
And I'm thinking, as you're talking, I'm thinking about how many of us as victims of this type of abuse go into our therapists, our doctors, and we say we're depressed, we're anxious, we're hurt, and we get medication, or we get like, you're the problem because you're depressed, and so my mind's sort of exploding as I'm hearing you talk, where the body's actually functioning the way it's meant to function to keep you safe. And instead of somebody saying, well, what is going, and this goes back to some of that Gabor Mate stuff. What is going on for you in your life that is shutting your body down or keeping you frozen? I feel like I want to, I want to mail this episode to everybody.
This is the difference between being a psychologist who's trauma informed and understands the nervous system and one who I was previously that didn't. Right. We pathologize, we medicalize, we label, oh, such and such has got ADHD. Well, ADHD to me nowadays is simply a label of lots of protector parts.
Yeah.
Or OCD or bipolar or depression. They're protector parts. They're happening with loving intention. Even this is really, really hard to understand, to protect you from feeling something that the brain perceives to be worse, a worse pain. The brain does not want you to feel your inner wounds bleeding. I don't feel good enough. I don't feel lovable. I don't feel important. I'm unworthy. That to the brain, which stemming from childhood, equals life-threatening danger. And when someone triggers us, what that person or that thing or that event or that smell is triggered is a past trauma response that is like someone coming up and just pulling a scab off an old wound, and the wound starts bleeding. And the brain does not want you to bleed. Okay, so then we have manager protector parts, anxiety, panic attacks, high achieving, people pleasing. The fawn response is one of those that manage us throughout our life. So we keep distracted by doing this, that, and the other. We're not kind of focusing on the pain of, I feel not good enough, I feel unlovable, I feel I don't matter, because that's too painful. Brain thinks if you feel that way, it means that you might die. So it kind of busies you with these manager protector parts, coping mechanism of your nervous system, what we see as it's just who I am. Because over time, from whenever they started forming, probably when we were very, very young, even pre-verbal sometimes, right? We blend with them and they become us. They're not us, they're part of us. And there is a process of separation that we do with somatic therapy where we really literally separate the timelines. A part of you, not you. So we can start to understand that these kind of behavioral aspects of us can actually be changed, can be guided differently, because we need them all. We need anxiety to get us to, focus on something important and urgent. We need fear to make sure that we keep safe. Where was I going with this? But basically, these protector parts are there with loving intention, albeit destructive impact, and they're not something you can control, including the fawning response. It's not something we go, I know, I'm just going to be really, really nice to someone is really, really horrible and hurtful to me. Why would anyone choose to do that? You're not choosing. That is your kind of coping mechanism, your subconscious blueprint of what to do when X, Y, and Z happens. I must be nicer, because that does reduce the threat for you. So you will do that. And that becomes a magnet to a narcissist or a toxic person who's a taker. You're like you've got flashing like a Christmas tree with flashing lights. Me, I will give you everything you need.
Pick me.
Because that's your version of normal. For them, on the other side of the spectrum, their version of normal is that you have to give to me, show me how good I am. It's literally the opposite end of the spectrum. And they expect you to show them. It's your job to show them and validate them how good they are. And what they do with their protector parts is that they blame you. They project on you. All of that inner wounded pain is projected outwards because they don't have the inner introspection capacity to go, that's too painful. The brain won't let them. Their protector parts won't ever let them take ownership for their woundedness.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of the absolute insidiousness of how the predator works. Because the predator comes in with love bombing almost every time with this like, love you, love you, love you, love you. You're awesome. You're perfect. Sort of on the surface looking as if they're healing those inner wounds of not being enough. And yet they're just controlling that narrative that you finally done it. You finally got your value. Like, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to tell you you're perfect. You're awesome. You're wonderful. You're everything. What would I do without you? And then just when you feel though the inner wounds are healing, they begin to tap into the inner wounds and start to traumatize you intentionally in order to trigger your trauma response. And it's much more powerful to trigger your trauma response when you're in love with somebody and they did think you were amazing and it was feeling healing. And now they're triggering all those deep trauma responses of please and appease by telling you now you aren't enough now. You aren't.
That's exactly what they do.
Like that insidiousness is just breathtaking.
Especially with covert predators, they are so clever. They portray this falsified image of being really charming and charismatic and generous and funny, and just, and behind closed doors, they're doing all this insidious abuse. And it's really, really difficult for the person who's been victimized by this, because one, they gaslight you to make you think you're crazy. They literally, they study you. They're calculating, they study you. They know exactly what you need to hear. It's all cognitive. There is literally, for the narcissist or the predator, there is no empathy. That part of the brain did not develop for them. And they also are individuals with less mirror neurons, so they have less empathy anyway. You looked at me weird, like, what are those?
No, my question was, do they know what they're doing? And you just pretty much said, yes, they know what they're doing.
They absolutely know what they're doing.
It's interesting because we talk about walking on eggshells, which is kind of like what you're talking about, a neuroception response. We know when we walk in the room if we've been abused by someone we call a predator, right? So I had a parental figure who I would call predator on a spectrum. So I have those spidey senses. I have those moments that if I'm in relationship with a friend and their partner is on that predatory scale, I can sense it and I can, fawn and try to get them on my side. But I also have a bit of, I think of it as a scapegoat child. Like, I can have an FU response as well now, which is I almost poke the bear a little bit. And I don't know if this is a healthy response, but it's funny because I've gone into situations, especially as a performer, where I know somebody is like a predator or a narcissist or something, and everybody around them is tiptoeing. And I'm the one who kind of goes in there and pokes a little bit. And I just wonder, like, I think I don't know if that's healthy, but I'm just saying that maybe I go in to take that role as a scapegoat, because then I get them acting like they're injured because I ask a really hard question of them. But I have this response of like, you can't make everybody around us tiptoe, because I hate it.
It's a fight?
I don't know if that's fight and if it's a good thing, or it's just something in me that's a little more. So that's even when I go and I'm in relationship with my predator parent, everybody in the family will shut down when this person is kind of spinning and trying to get the world to tiptoe around them. I don't. I keep asking. And sometimes it causes a lot of abuse on me because of that. So I don't know what I'm asking, but
are you saying you set yourself up to be
somewhat
hurt by the predator,
yes,
in order to minimize the damage to other people, or just to call it out?
To call it out because I'm a little pissed off by it. I'm pissed off when everybody jumps around and tiptoes around somebody like that. So
maybe it's because you know that at the end of the day,
I have no idea.
They can't. They can't kill you. They can't.
Maybe, but it's
like you are a survivor.
Yeah, but I become the scapegoat child or the person in the room because I'm the one becoming like, you're so mean. But I'm just putting that out there because maybe someone in our audience feels the same way. It's like when I feel people tiptoeing, I hate it.
It is a trauma response. It's kind of that vengeful, it's unfair. And, the thing is, if it wasn't coming as a trauma response, it would be a lot calmer, and it wouldn't be kind of like, I'm going to poke you because I'm going to show you. However, what to me that indicates is that the reason why you are the cycle breaker in your family. And the scapegoat usually is rebellious because the scapegoat is selected as a scapegoat because they are the one that are mostly outspoken normally. They're the strongest ones. So they want to squash them down. I'm going to keep blaming you. It's all your fault, to try and kind of, suppress those traits in you that they feel are very, very threatening towards the narcissist or to the predator.
Thank you for saying that. As far as that it is a trauma response, because I don't feel in control of it. It, not in like I'm wildly out of control, but just like I see it and I have to I can't help myself.
That's deep.
And whenever we say that we can't help ourselves, we can't. It's a trauma response. It's happening involuntarily. It's a defense mechanism. Because the truth is, if you had healed whatever the inner wound is there for you from having grown up in such a family, you really wouldn't care. It wouldn't trigger you. It wouldn't trigger that response. You'd be like, they'll get, because it's not your job to show other people that they're horrible, right? Look, you wouldn't to show the world, look, you're all tiptoeing. It's wrong, You
wouldn't waste your energy.
Healed, you'll just you look at them and everyone's behavior and think, oh, I'd have so much compassion, and just save your energy for something else.
Yeah.
It takes energy to then receive that abuse, right? And it kind of perpetuates that. It's a cycle. It's a family dynamic.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that, because it's something that I've never really understood about myself, because there's times where I do walk into an area and I will fawn because I want the partner of the person to like me, so I do put that. But if I see it in a different context, I'm like, screw that. I ain't doing that.
Yeah, and it also depends on your nervous system flexibility and capacity at each time, right? In each event, if you've had a really stressful, triggering day and you're already really full and you're like, oh no, I'm not going to let you get away with this. Whereas in another occasion, you might just feel more vulnerable and think, actually, no, I just want them on my side because I can't deal with the extra challenge and having to deal with the abuse, so, and our nervous system is shifting all the time.
Man, this is so good.
Okay, so in another part of my life, I've been studying organizational leadership, and there's a quote that I happened upon by an author. Her name is Meg Wheatley, and this what she says is not about the body. It's about systems and about organizations, but I want to read it to you, and I'm just wondering if we can connect it to polyvagal theory or our nervous system. She says, if a system is in trouble, it can be restored to health by connecting it to more of itself. To make a system stronger, we need to create stronger relationships. The system is then capable of solving its own problems. Do you see that as being true in our nervous system? Like
100%, and in life, actually. And I always say this in lots of my reels, we heal together. So it's not just reconnecting with ourself, with our true self, which is the whole point of the somatic inner healing journey I take my clients through. It's actually reconnecting that knowing part of the brain with that feeling part of the brain, so you can know who you are, your true self, without unblended from your protector parts. Because the truth is, we are all born good enough. We're all born lovable. We're all born important. We're all born worthy and deserving, and that we matter. All of us. What child do you know that isn't born that way? It's just that life and traumas then tell us a different story, which is not true. So reconnecting with that part of you that knows, feels good enough, feels worthy, feels safe. Because a lot of this stems down to feeling unsafe, right? Because as a child, you don't feel good enough. There's no one protecting you because you're not good enough to be protected. You feel unsafe. So your version of normal becomes, I'm not safe. Okay. When we can reconnect first with ourselves, with our own neuroception, okay, then we can be aligned with other people and know who good people are and spot a narcissist or a predator from miles and not attract them anymore, because we're not those wounded individuals anymore. It's our wounds that attract the predator. It's not a true self. When we are in true self leadership, we can set boundaries and we have self-respect, self-worth, self-love, self-esteem, self-safety. We are, our house, our body is our safe house. And therefore we don't attract those people in our life. And when we can reconnect our inner system, we're then also able to connect outside our social engagement system. That's what we do. We tone our vagus nerve, the social engagement part of the vagus nerve, which is from the back of the neck to the chest. We tone it. So we feel safe in ourselves, I'm safe to be me. It is safe to be me, because we learn in early developmental stages it's not safe to be me, because when I'm me, I'm punished in some way, or
rejected,
segregated, or excluded, or ostracized, or whatever. When we feel safe to be us, then we can be we're able to connect with the right people and feel safe with them in that relationship as well. So outside network and inside network. And for myself, in my own personal healing journey, that aspect of healing the network internally first before I could feel safe externally too was huge. That community, that sense of kind of safe connection was huge in my healing, because my version was people are not safe. So when they do give, and it's not safe for me to receive love because I'm not good enough. So when people did love me, it felt unsafe. When your version of normal is not feeling safe, safety feels unsafe.
Yes.
I think I've said that in the previous episode. Yeah, and that analogy of the organization is perfect for this, for the nervous system and healing on a somatic level, because it's disconnection from our true self. That's what being wounded is.
So do you think that the body could potentially heal itself in physical ways by becoming more aligned with its nervous system? Like, okay, we've talked about Gabor Mate in his book, When the Body Says No. I would love for you to comment on, does that vagal nerve disconnect affect the body physically?
Yes, 100%. So my paroxysmal hemicardia continua, that disorder that I have, that it's a trauma disorder. Now I know that 100%. I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't claim that, healing somatically your nervous system will heal. But this is what I see with my clients. They come on pills for anxiety and then they go away without pills for anxiety. Well, why is that? They come with fibromyalgia and then they don't have pain in their body anymore. Well, that's funny because, we're not saying that all pain is emotional, but, there is an emotional element to it. And so how much of that pain, that physical pain that we're suffering with, that chronic pain, that, tumors, cancers, because the thing is, stress, cortisol in our body, when it gets stuck, it causes inflammation. That's not a secret. This is a scientific, well-known fact. Cortisol equals bad, equals heart disease, equals, all sorts of other, right? So it kind of follows then that, if you have all this inflammation, all this stuck stress hormone in your body, in your fascia, it's going to cause inflammation in the body. And that equals, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It creates, fibromyalgia, all these kind of, diseases, MS, all sorts of diseases that are really difficult to kind of know what's the cause and what's the resolution, and yet they seem to kind of, oh, you're bipolar, but you're no longer bipolar. Suddenly you seem to be quite stable and balanced because you've healed. So, we can't ignore that. We can't ignore the fact that there are some physical elements to this, to what trauma causes. It's not a secret that, stress equals bad health, bad physical health, as well as mental. It's not just mental. It's trauma is stored in the body. And that will cause, the disconnection, the damage to the vagus nerve, the neurotransmitters not traveling properly, it all causes inflammation. And then we get these weird diseases that we don't know, how to resolve them. And, we live in this pain that no doctor can tell us why it's there, how can we cure it?
Because they're not even looking in the right spot.
Yeah, and most doctors don't look at the holistic picture. I think through my process of discovering what my digestive chronic disease was, I got asked once, and it was by accident because I really researched and went here and went there, and then in one of the letters they said vagus nerve, the vagus nerve, non-invasive vagus nerve treatment, and I was just like, I have no idea what that is. That was before I did any of this work, and then I started doing this work, and I'm like, vagus nerve, let me get that letter, and I connected the dots. But that was one doctor out of God knows how many who misdiagnosed me, gave me these tablets, that tablets. No one has ever asked me, have you had trauma in your life? Apart from that one doctor that then later on said there is this non-invasive vagus nerve treatment that you can do. I still haven't received it because, that's the state of affairs with our health system at the moment here. But I just found it super interesting. And, I 100% know that my chronic facial disease is to do with the upper part of my vagus nerve. I've done lots of research into it. There is also an intergenerational trauma element to it. I 100% know that my stomach stuff is definitely related to trauma, in terms of the length of time I've had them and, how it relates to the digestive system with the vagus nerve there, etc. It completely makes sense once you understand how the nervous system and, the vagus nerve work. It completely makes sense. Pain is a great distraction. If you don't pay attention to a headache, guess what happens? It becomes a migraine. And then you're going to pay attention because I'm going to shut you down and you go to bed. Can't do anything now, can you? The body will whisper and whisper and whisper, but because we're so disconnected, we don't hear, we don't know what it's saying. Don't understand the language of our body because we're told, I was sharing about my children's school, right? No, you're not allowed to go to the toilets. You can only go with a medical pass. Now, needing the toilet is a medical need.
Yeah.
What are you teaching children? That they need to ignore their bodily sensations. That's what you're teaching them. That authority decides whether it's okay to need the toilet.
It's just such an unhealthy, but that's what we do. We kind of double down on what we like. If a little bit of control is not working, let's put a lot of control on that.
And it's that oppression education model that we live in our society in general, that teaches us that what we feel, don't feel, actually. Not just that what we feel isn't right, like you were saying earlier, I kind of like, no, don't be silly, don't feel like that. That's silly. Well, it's not. It's actually, it's supposed to be working as part of your kind of protection mechanism of survival. Neuroception isn't there for nothing. That's why I was making the example of the animal eating and then suddenly it perks its ears, or you walking into a room. Why? Why do we have this if it's not necessary? Why do we have this felt sense? And also there's something more. We also have an exchange. It's called limbic countertransference, where we communicate without any words from person to person. Depending on how many mirror neurons we're born with and we develop in our body, we have, higher sensitivity or lower sensitivity, depending on the trauma. When I hear someone saying, oh, I'm an empath, I said, I'm an empath. I really feel people's pain on a body level. I always have, but that's also a trauma response. Because guess what? When you've always had to be really careful about who you are, because otherwise it was dangerous to be you become really hypersensitive to other people's moods, other people's states of, their nervous system states. You might not know that that's what it is, but we're communicating. It's like, you're sometimes around certain people and you feel really drained of energy, even just standing next to them. Don't have to converse even. But it's like, it's like being next to a drain, literally. Whereas you're with other people and you feel energized. Why? Limbic countertransference. That's our emotional brain communicating. It's our nervous system communicating with another nervous system. Because as humans, we are social animals. We're wired for connection. We need all these elements to keep us safe.
So it's about validating that thing in us that makes us prey, the survivor, validating that neuroception, validating the fact that we can be intuitive to the surroundings, or someone is unsafe. And that's okay to feel that, because oftentimes we're told, you're too sensitive. That was something I got a lot of. Like we've talked about that before. You're too sensitive. And I had a therapist who once said to me, you're not sensitive enough. And it wasn't a judgment. It was just, but it wasn't a judgment. I took it as like, I could be sensitive and that's okay. And because the person who was calling me too sensitive was because they didn't want me to be sensitive at all. They wanted me just to take the abuse. So it allowed me, because in those moments I would hear, you're not sensitive. I'd be like, no, I'm going to stand up for myself. But it's great to hear this because it validates somebody in our listeners who maybe gone through these things and does have a trauma response, but to go, hey, that is, you have this ability to sense the surroundings around you and sense who's...
And, there are two sides to this coin, right? Because when trauma causes those physiological changes to the brain where, your fear center, the amygdala enlarges and your hippocampus next to it shrinks. That's our little time stamping machine, our memory, kind of like, oh, this happened yesterday, and you file it away. That shrinks so it can't time stamp things. And so the stressful experiences that happen, they stay live, like they're happening still now. Okay, that's why you then become hypervigilant. So your brain ends up scanning for much more for cues of danger than it would normally if it was a healthy size, its normal size. And the hippocampus can't, when things that are bad happen, they can't timestamp it properly and say, this is finished now. So you're constantly like on eggshells. You're constantly like, oh, danger, danger, danger. So Still lean into the sensations because they are valid. There is a reason why your body is hypervigilant. Still listen to that, lean into it. It wants to be acknowledged. It doesn't want to be diminished and pushed away and just don't be silly. You know, it's important. What the difference is that there is, it's like when we say that someone, oh my God, why does she overreact like that? Well, to her nervous system, that is a neuroceptive match, the response, because it's, if your nervous system, your invisible nervous system is feeling hypervigilant and perceiving danger right, left, and center, okay, and it's responding in a trauma response, it's a neuroceptive match. It's doing the right thing for your system. Okay. To the outside world, it might look like, oh my God, you just dropped the keys on the floor and you started crying. You're nuts. What's wrong with you?
That's exactly where the predator comes in and uses that exact response to make you feel insane. Like, look at you. What are you doing? You dropped your keys and you're crying. Like, you got a problem. Like, you're like, so many things are clicking right now.
Coming from a feeling of safety, and if you feel safe in your body, then you wouldn't be overreacting to things. You'd be coming from there will be a neuroceptive match. Okay, this is happening. I respond like this because I'm safe. Okay. And it's fine. And it looks kind of balanced on the outside and inside in your body. But if you're feeling activated in your body because your body's perceiving danger and you don't know it, and then, you know, you overreact by crying or like shouting, you know, to something that looks insignificant on the outside and you don't know yourself why, then you shame yourself as well and you blame yourself. Oh, why did I do that? I know I shouldn't. And then you go into your cognitive brain and re-traumatize yourself because you start to analyze, I know better than this. I shouldn't.
Right.
It's a vicious cycle that you get stuck in, which is what that trauma stuck in your body creates, right? It's that not understand, that's the lack of knowledge around your nervous system and why things are happening the way that they are.
And you might not fully understand that, but I have a feeling the predator understands that exactly.
Oh, yeah. They know exactly how to get you weak.
Yes.
Because that's the whole intent there is to manipulate you and control you as easily as they possibly can. So, you know, they're constantly trying to do things to diminish you, to devalue you,
to trigger,
to make you question yourself. That's what gaslighting is all about, isn't it? It's just like you start to question your own sanity then, and it's like so much easier.
meant to trigger your trauma response. I know, and you know, I hate to sound like a broken record, but can you come back?
We have more to talk to you about.
I feel like you left us with more burning questions. One of the questions I know that we talked about earlier is you've got this amazing program that you work with, and tell us a little bit about your generational trauma and breaking the cycle. When we meet again, would you be willing to kind of share with us a little bit about that work that you do? Because that's a whole other world that we are very, very excited to share with the people that are with us in our community and the broader community that needs this work.
Yeah. All I'll say on that note is, yes, I would love to. And I just want people to know that when there's adult trauma, there is always childhood trauma, whether you know or not. And it doesn't just start from the moment you're born. It starts from before, in utero, pre-verbal.
Wow. Oh, we can't wait.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you so much.
Ladies. It's been lovely again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Now, who's excited for part 3? We wanted to say a big thank you to Carla for joining us and blowing our minds with her knowledge and compassion when talking about trauma and emotional abuse. Tune in next week to learn more from Carla, and make sure you go check out her podcast, Time to Unlearn, where she helps you heal from your past, rediscover your true identity, and realize your full potential in your life. You can find us at Prey vs. Predator on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and of course on all major podcast platforms. We do our best to engage with our full online community, so if you have questions or comments about our show, please reach out to us. We would love to hear from you.